Hello everyone, Shawn Kenney here, and I'm back playing some more StarMade. I want to talk to you a little bit about faction modules, some work on my base, and I also want to do some tests on weapon configurations. Maybe try and see if we can do some experimentation to debunk or confirm any myths that we might have about antimatter cannons. I'm not dealing with missiles in this one. This is just strictly antimatter cannons and faction modules in this video. I might have a look at missiles later on. So the first thing I want to talk about is the faction module. Now you're going to find this in the shop at several prices. I found them for several prices ranging between about 120,000 credits to 230,000 credits. I'm not quite sure whether maybe it's there's a certain amount of supply or something. It figures how many blocks it has, what it sells it at, or whether it's just sort of somewhat random between a certain range. But what the faction modules are going to allow you to do is create a faction, which you can think of that as like a guild or yeah, I mean a guild's really the way to think about it in StarMade. So if you have multiple people, I mean you can have a guild just or a faction just of yourself. Of course, in multiplayer servers, that's where this is really geared for. A group of people get together, decide they want to create a faction, and what they'll be able to do is add faction modules onto their ships and bases, and that essentially gives it a faction. What that also allows you to do is you can set a home base, and that home base ends up being indestructible. Now, I know I've had a few people ask like how I built my base. When I built this base, why didn't I just make it part of the planet? And I can. We totally do it that way. That would be one option. I just wasn't sure as far as adding shields to the planet. I mean, I can add the faction module right away, and we can make it invulnerable, which I'm going to do here. But I was just sort of like, this little black column, this is all attached to the planet. So this is basically like a build block, adding a little bit of power and a little bit of shields to the planet itself. Whereas we have, the station. This is created as a station. It's got a bit of power, and of course we have a bunch of shield blocks underneath our floor here right now. So I did make just a little tiny ship because I wanted to just try and test it out a little bit. One thing you notice, if you do add shields to a planet, apparently they oh, I'm really just sliding around here. Okay, let's try not to okay, so I mean, I can shoot the planet and it doesn't appear to have any shields, but I believe it actually is getting the shield benefit from the few. I didn't put a lot of shields on there, and this is just a pretty simple cannon, so it's not going to do a whole lot. I'm sure if I just hang on there, but I mean, I can shoot these blocks. They don't seem to be getting hurt. It's not putting up the shield effect. But with a sufficient power, with a cannon that can get through it, eventually it does get through and will damage the planet. Whereas if it's created as a station, as you can see, we're getting the nice shield effects. So we can see that we're getting shielded. So I think that one of my initial tests were putting shields on a planet and saying, oh, well, this doesn't really look like it's working. When, in fact, it really kind of is, because I mean, if we were shooting this block, it would be getting damaged if there were no shields to it. So, I guess I made the base. It didn't really need to do it. Certainly made things a little more complicated as far as, switching between the two. But I do like that shield effect. I mean, what can I say? Maybe if they can add it to a planet, maybe switch things around, but as it is now, I'm dealing with it. It's all right. But let's start off by placing a faction module. So we'll put the faction module on our station here first. So that's it. I just place it down, and then you can press R, and it's going to be saying you have to be in a faction to activate this block. Alright, so we're going to need to create a faction. In order to do that, I'm going to press I to bring up the inventory, and I'm going to go down and we're going to click on faction. So I say we have currently no faction. All we need to do is create a new faction. So enter a name for the new faction. If you're already in a faction, you will leave that faction when creating a new one. Okay, fair enough. So we need a name for our faction, and we'll call it, how about a faction. It's pretty strict. You can't put spaces, so you know, a faction 1, it's going to accept it. So when I was using spaces on my last one, it was giving me an error message, but it's decided to take it. Maybe I don't know. Whatever. Okay, so we're in a faction now. We have a faction. Our guild, our faction name is a faction 1. So what I can do is I can, when I press R on the faction block that I've placed, I can now either enter a faction signature or I can reset it. Now, of course, there is no faction to the space now, but when I reset it, you can see up in the top right there, it changes the faction to neutral. So essentially this would be just like finding a neutral base out in space at this point. Now if I go in and I want to enter the faction signature, now that's changed my starbase to my faction. Alright, but it's still vulnerable. I mean, it has shields and everything, but you know, given enough time, we can blow it up. The last thing that we can then do is, now that it's set to our faction, when we hit R on it, you see another option comes up and it says make faction home. So if we do that, this is now our home faction, and our starbase in here is completely invulnerable. In fact, it doesn't even seem to be taking shots. Cannot attack a faction. So it's not like, even though we have shields and everything, it doesn't even matter, because it's just going to be, you cannot attack a faction's home base. So it just doesn't even register the whole attack. So, and that's pretty much it. Like I could, if I enter it, I believe that takes away the home base status of it. No, it still counts as the home base. So, like, if I were to reset, I'd have to reset it if I wanted to change it. Or what I can do is I can take a faction module. I can also place it on a planet, and we can pretty much do. We have the exact same options. I can enter the faction signature, and so now the planet is part of our faction, but it's not invulnerable. If I were to make it a home faction, now the planet essentially is invulnerable, although our base now is not. You can only have one home base for your faction at a given time. So if I were to, if we were going to our little ship and try and attack the base, once again, you know, the shields are picking it up, and then we try and attack the wall, which is part of the planet, and it's saying it's a home base, so we can't attack it at all. I am in this particular survival game. I will not actually. I don't think I'm going to really be using this as a home faction. I'll set it as my faction because I do want to show you something about planetary turrets when adding factions. That you will need to add a faction module to your turrets in order to dock, or your ships for that matter, in order to dock with a factioned starbase. That makes any sense. So, if you want to put turrets on a base or a planet that is part of your faction, those turrets or ships that will dock with it will require a faction module on it, and they will also require to be set to a friendly faction, right? So if you're in another faction, you can't dock with another faction's base. So once, so that's basically, like I said, I don't think I'm going to go with the whole invulnerable route. Maybe just initially for a little bit of building. Now the other thing is, while that base or the planet is set as a faction and it's invulnerable, if I do go into the build block on the planet, I can still modify the planet. See, if I go, this is a home planet, I can't damage it with weapons, but you know, because I'm part of the faction, I can still go into the build block and do modifications on the planet. So that makes that easy. So the other thing, I was working on a planetary defense cannon, and frankly, I'm not really happy. You know what? It's like just a big rectangle. I'm not super happy with it. It's sort of experimenting around. It's fairly large and everything. Now this is just right on the planet itself, and basically I tried to contain power in the cannon, so I don't really have much in the way of power generation on the planet itself to feed this, but it did require a faction module, which is well, it's actually hidden up in there. It's right above, it's a block right above. Yeah, there it is. See, I can enter the faction. So it's I just put it in there, and that's the only way to get it to dock with a base or a planet that has a faction. So as you can see, I mean, I was cleared out sort of a large area, thinking I might have a nice big planetary defense cannon, and ultimately that is still my plan. Although I'm going to make it much cooler. I was sort of just trying to make it some definitely powerful, and have enough energy and everything, and some shields to deal with it if it's under attack. But it's just a box, so I don't think that's really going to work. But before I started getting fancier in the cannon, I wanted to really test out how the antimatter cannons are working, what configurations do what, if there is any effect. So I've made a test bed with a number of different weapons configurations that I could think of. I think I covered most of the bases here. There may be a few configurations that I haven't tried, of course, but what I was finding doing this test is I don't think it's going to matter a whole lot. The methodology I was using is I'm just adding 1 power block, the weapons computer, and then 10 antimatter cannons. So this is, your basic straight up, just a straight cannon, and this will do 80 points of damage, and it fires, not incredibly quickly, but I don't have a stopwatch to maybe figure out the exact rate of fire or anything here, but as you can see, it does about 80 points of damage, and it's 1/1000. It'll have about 2 shots a second, maybe, or something like that. I started guesstimating. So then I decided, okay, well, if we try just one straight line, what if we basically make like a box? So this is a 3x3. That's 10 total antimatter cubes and antimatter cannons. And once again, you may see a little harder to see the shot, but it's still doing 80. And I really think that seems to be firing at pretty much the same rate of fire. So once again, it doesn't really seem to be making a whole lot of difference. This one is 5 antimatter cubes, so just sort of put in a smaller block. And as you can see, once again, same rate of fire, 80 points of damage. Doesn't seem to be any difference. Slightly different, just slightly different configuration, but still just 10 blocks, and as you can guess, 80 points of damage, same rate of fire. Now here was more along the lines of using the individual blocks separated out, so we have 10 blocks separated out, and in this case it is doing a lot less damage. It's only doing 25. I'm thinking it's 25 per shot though, so you can also see that it does they converge in on the target. Is this more effective, less effective? I think the rate of fire is slightly slower. It does have the potential to say maybe do a little bit more, perhaps a little more damage. I mean, if each one of those shots is 25, then clearly we would be doing more, although we're only seeing that one number 25 pop up. So it's a little harder to judge necessarily. Okay, so in the cases, if we see there, we get a couple hits, so each is 25. So I definitely see where when they were saying sort of individual blocks potentially could have quite a bit more DPS than, say, larger blocks. The trade-off, though, of course, is the much slower rate of fire, and the individual damage that each shot does is quite a bit less. So that configuration, may, like I said, people have said it's pretty good for small fighters. Potentially, yeah. It's just different, I think, is the best way to say it. I don't want to say that this is necessarily the way to go versus, these ones, they were doing, say, more damage, and I think they were, if you look at the rate of fire of them compared, it's maybe just a little slightly faster. It kind of depends whether you think you're going to be hitting more or missing. Now, once again, just basically took just a straight line horizontal. Now, this one does get a little bit more confusing because it's just going to select one of the blocks, usually one of the edge blocks, so I think that's shooting from the right. But as you can see, it's still just doing 80 points of damage, seems to be about the same rate of fire. I would be able to, say, go in here and change my output. So if I wanted to do that, if I wanted to center it, it should still be all working pretty much exactly the same, only now it should start, yeah, it's going to fire out of the center, so maybe it's a little bit easier to, aim. But once again, 80 points of damage, 10 blocks, it's pretty much the same rate of fire. So I think we're really starting to see a bit of a trend here. Once again, I just maybe try blocking it up a little bit. So once again, 10, just tried smushing it together, make as much as a cube, and then added the extra 2 to make it 10. And once again, we're getting 80 points of damage, pretty much the same rate of fire. And so this other one is, this one I was sort of trying out my coil design, as I featured in some previous videos, and people are like, oh, well, you do need that, or you don't need that, it's not efficient. Well, you know what, it's no better than all the rest. It does 80 points of damage and at the same rate of fire. So it's all, if anything, maybe I'm saving space, but not really. Like, you can probably just cram this all in a block, and that's going to be even slightly smaller. So, all my coil weapons design were, thinking the weapons behave in a different way, and through experimentation found out that really doesn't matter. It's just solid blocks probably are okay. And the last one I want to try is, like, what if I just put out in the axes, and once again, I think we're at 80 with pretty much the same rate of fire once again. So it just seems to be the total number of antimatter blocks that you have connected, and that modifies the damage as well as the rate of fire. I believe that the more blocks you have, also the longer range that the weapons will fire at. So as you can see, like a bunch of little test beds, I can't really think of any other major configurations that would be, majorly different to this. I suppose, one thing that we could try and is maybe separating them out to 2 blocks. So maybe I'll try it with this one just to make it easier, and say the only other thing that maybe we could try would be whether, if we had 5 cannons, I need to remove that faction module. Okay, we'll select the weapons computer, and we'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. Come on now. There we go. Yeah, so that should be 10 blocks, and oh, you know what I did? I accidentally deleted the weapons computer. Alright, we'll just select all those. Okay. And so it's only doing shooting out of one of them. Now, why would that be? Maybe let's try replacing these. Perhaps I did something wrong, but we'll see here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah. Nope. There we go. Okay. So now we're getting 2 shots at 56. So this almost might be the better way to go, really. Because I think only one. Yeah. Okay, so each one's doing 56 points of damage. And so that would, give us 112 points of damage versus the 80. The rate of fire, I mean, honestly, it almost seems to be about the same. Let's try this one over here. You know, 2, 3. Okay, so that's kind of interesting. So, if we're going to maybe have the same number of blocks, I mean, maybe this is sort of the end result of, when you getting right down to it, like each individual block separated out is maybe more efficient. Let's, I suppose while we're at it, let's see what else we can try here. Maybe 3. If I go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, that'll give us 9. Maybe 1 the fourth to make it 10. So this is giving us 3 shots. One is doing 50, the other 2 are doing 43. So, yeah, I mean, okay, so that definitely is doing more damage. So, you know, following this trend, I mean, perhaps maybe really, like they say, for smaller ships, having them all separated out like that may be the right way to go. I mean, if we'd start really separating them out, what if we get 4 here? A little harder to tell what each. So I'm guessing 43s for the. I must have to, because they keep wanting to go for a point target, but we got like 43 of 35. I'm guessing which one? Those 2 are the 35s. So if we do it like this. Well, so we have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Okay, that's kind of interesting. Alright, so I mean, I haven't haven't really gone and done any math on this. I mean, it is sort of shaping up that maybe the smaller little cannons may end up being the better way to go, unless you want, you know, a powerful cannon. At which point you just want to, you can just put as many as you want in a big clump, and that's going to ultimately work for you. Don't really need to worry about coiling or really too much in the way of fancy configuration. It just seems like as you add more blocks, it's going to be doing more damage, firing faster. There does seem to be some efficiency though when you have, like, if you just have a small ship doing a bunch of smaller cannons. I wonder if this can ultimately make its way through the shields. It's definitely more of a. Yeah, I mean, those shields are starting to go down now. So, okay, that's interesting. Whereas, you know, even just having a couple that are set as 2. So I'm guessing if each one of these is doing 25, if we have 10 separate blocks, each doing 25, then, you know, we're looking at 250 damage per each shot. So I guess that kind of settles it, I would think, unless there's some more configurations that, you know, I probably haven't thought of that may do a better job. But it seems like when they're all connected, it's just you're going to get the same amount of damage. See, all these types of configuration, whether it's 10 blocks connected, they're all doing the same amount of damage with the same rate of fire. It just seems to be when we start changing it around a little bit, maybe splitting them up a little bit, that we're actually getting maybe a little bit more efficient use out of it. One thing to keep in mind though, unfortunately, when I tried doing all single blocks like this on a large scale, it does cause quite a bit of lag at the moment, so it can make it very difficult for larger ships. And the slower rate of fire is also a little trickier, especially when you have a heavier ship and it's harder to maneuver. So I still sort of I'm a fan of just nice big block cannons for larger ships in that way. So using this information, when I make a planetary cannon, I'm probably just going to make one big block of cannons for the sake of lag, to make it easier on myself, and it should be a relatively powerful cannon. I don't have to worry about sort of any fancy configuration. Other than I want to make it something other than a rectangle. I'm going to try and work on those circles, maybe get the old Minecraft circle chart up and see what I can do to make an actual cannon-shaped cannon. or maybe a a Hoth nipple cannon. That would be fun too. I'll have a look at it and see what I can do. But anyways, that is faction modules and some weapons testing. I'm Shawn Kenney. This is StarMade, and thanks for watching. So long for now.